And the talk about is a few things that I think people need to know about, and it's one, we know in now the government has scrapped all the isolation and all the rules and regulations around COVID, right? We know that. We're happy for it. We've got our freedoms back, right? Everything seems to be back to normal and people are happy about that. It's a good thing. But I don't think the government has realised that there are a lot of people still concerned about the variants that are arising from not COVID now so much, it's the omicron variants and the variants that are growing in splinters from this. And I don't think the government's realising that with everything that's happening now, and we're all going back to normal, no mask wearing, there's no this, there's no that, no Q&R and all that, that's gone, good riddance. But the thing is, one thing we should be keeping, and the government should really be aware of the fact that these variants aren't going to go anywhere. If anything, they could get worse. They could get better. But the thing is, the government's got to realise that a lot of people are concerned about these COVID testing sites, hubs, stations, call them what you are, where people can go, roll up, get tested, get peace of mind, and know that they're doing the right thing if they're sick or whatever, and that they don't have to go to their local GP or to emergency and wait there for hours, or they don't have to, like with the doctors, as we all know, it's so hard to get in to see your doctor. It's a 2-week wait, basically, so that's ridiculous. And also with testing, you can't get pre-testing kits anymore. So if all those concerns of people now facing the fact that they may not be able to get tested at all unless they pay for it. People don't have $50 to go and see their local doctor. They don't have money to go to the chemist and get test kits. I mean, all that's been scrapped. And the thing is that if the government closes these COVID testing stations, hubs, call them what you want, people have got nothing. And I don't think it's a good idea to do that. I think if you left them in your suburbs where people could go, peace of mind, get tested, and have that reassurity and peace of mind that they can do that, then the government's being responsible. They're not, just letting everything go and people fetch and offend for themselves, if you know what I mean, And I went to get tested the other day and asked the young lady what was going to happen. She said, to be quite honest, December, they could be closing after December. And I was horrified because I thought, well, where do I go? What do I do? So many people, and there were people rolling up in their cars to get tested. And I thought, is there a need? And I did ask the young lady there that's testing me, do you think there's a need for this? And she said, yeah. But they're very worried that people work in that industry, that they're going to be nothing. They're just going to be closed down, that's that. And I don't think the government is realising that. So it's a good thing if they leave these COVID testing sites open for the public. Okay, that was one I think that people really need to be aware of, because after December, you may not have those facilities in your suburbs. And I think people rely on that and feel safe knowing that they can go and get tested and it's going to cost them nothing. But if they close, people don't have that. They have nothing. So, and I think that's a poor state of affairs for the government to have the Australian people in. Anyway, that was one thing, one subject, topic I think that was really needed to be talked about, because I don't think many people are aware of that. Unless you rock up, get tested, ask what's happening, then you may get told, no, after December, we won't be. They'll just pack up and go away. And I think, as I said, pretty poor management from the government to do that. So be mindful, government, because people still need that safeguard. Okay, number 2 is I suppose everybody's heard about new variants and whatever else and so forth, but there is a new variant, and it's, I don't know whether it's here, there. I know it's in Singapore, and it is travelling all around the world, and it eventually will get here in Oz, if it isn't already. And that's the variant XBB variant strain. And that's in Singapore at the moment. And as is, they say that in the middle of November it should reach its peak. But they're not quite sure on that. That's what they say. It should. But we don't know. But this variant, they say, is, they haven't got a real clue on what it's about and what it does. But as we can, you know, learn our lessons well with the omicrons and that come, and Delta and whatever else, they made a lot of people very sick. A lot of people died and whatever else, and ended up with other long-term sicknesses and long-term COVID. So we know nothing about this variant, but apparently it's heading our way. Now the thing is, it's going to be hitting November for Singapore, the Singaporeans. Now the thing is, if that's the case, then you bet your bottom dollar by January, February, heading into winter next year here in Oz, that we will have another variant, another concern of variant, another sickness on our hands. So I think people want to be mindful of that, because, you know, we're not untouchable. Nobody's untouchable from these variants, and as they say, they call them growing splinters of the variants. So we've got to be mindful of that, where we are. So, you know, everything's been scrapped now, from mask wearing, sanitising, everything's been scrapped, and people are going back to normal. You've got to realise, okay, to safeguard yourself from this may be a concern, a variant. It may knock everybody on their ass, but then again, it may be a mild flu. Who knows? But the thing is, you've got to realise now, you've got to be aware of everything you do, because November, it hits over in Singapore. Well, November is kind of like, it's the start of, you know, initiating the parties, you know, work's closed down, work parties, people start to G up for Christmas, you know, everything's free, people are in the plazas, people are everywhere, singing Christmas carols. Every single thing involves people around people. Now, if you're not cautious and you think, oh, well, I'm just going to let me safeguard down, then you're being foolish. Do yourself a favour, assess where you go, what you do, take a mask, even you may not wear it, but at least you got one, in case there is those times that you need it. Assess where you go. I mean, if you go down your local pub, you know, and you see a few people coughing where you eat, are you going to take your family there to a pub that's got no, you know, free ventilation and so forth, or are you going to go to another hotel or another beer garden that's fresh with open air? At least it gives yourself the chance of, you know, stopping anything as if you would be in an air conditioning place, or a place that had no fresh air running through. So, you know, just little things like that you need to be aware of. Where you go, assess it before you go in. Make sure you have your mask, that sort of thing. And if you're sick, be conscious that you're sick, okay? Because a lot of these things the government's already taken away. How hard is it to get into your local doctors? Heaps hard. Is it a long time wait at the local emergency? Yes, it is. No fault to the nurses or doctors, but it just is. How many people have got money to go and get testing kits? Not many. How many people have got money to spend and go and, as I said, see a doctor if they've got to pay 50 bills, maybe more? Not many. So a lot of people are going to go, well, we don't really care. We're going to have a Codral flu tablet. That'll fix it. No, your aches or pains and that sort of thing. Go out in society and think nothing more of it, and then the contagion grows. If there are more variants and strains that are going to be a concern in 2023. And also think about your remodified freedoms, your freedoms. You want to keep your freedoms, people? Well, do something about it. Safeguard Oz. You know, every individual that lives in Australia should have that and say, okay, well, we don't want to be locked down. We don't want our remodified freedoms. We don't want to be dictated to. We don't want this. We don't want that. We'll do something about it, Oz, because as I said, winter time next year, we could be in serious trouble with other variants of this XBB variant that is now in Singapore. Okay, that's November. Singapore hits. It's only a couple of months, and then it'll hit here, as it is in the other parts of the world. So that was just one little touchdown I think that people need to be aware of. Some people I know that are aware of this new variant, and a lot of people I speak to say they're really concerned about this variant. Other people say, what variant? Never knew there was. So, you know, keep in tune and in contact with what's happening with things. And I think it'd be a good thing if the government also backs that, you know, to be wise, to wear your mask, to do things, to be responsible as a citizen and to be responsible as a nation is a good thing. Okay, now that was it. Now there was another important topic. It's the trains, everybody. Hello! Has everybody forgotten the train situation? Don't think so. I thought I had to chuck that in because it's like, okay, what's happening now? Oh my goodness me. As if Oz doesn't know what's happening is that with the government and the unions, they were going to just allow people to go through without opal tapping. Okay, that was their way of fighting back and giving that little bit of a stir to the government. But the government was really, really tittered off. Aren't you, government? And the Minister of Transport's really like, we can't have this. I might sue them. I might do this. I might do that. Oh, come on, grow up, government. You know, the union's strong here in Australia, and a lot of people that work believe in the union. Now, if you're any type of minister, you would sit down, even though you may not want to or like to, but sit down and really have an over-the-table discussion with these people. Or as I've stated before on my YouTube, it's going to be catastrophic, really bad, and that's where it's heading. I mean, you know, and people now don't want to feel that they're getting on a train and having, you know, transport police come up and find them because they didn't tap on, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. So they get fined. Not a good go, government, not a good look, anybody, you know. So think about that, because a lot of people are going to be worried and concerned that they're going to pick up a fine. And not only that, are the trains going to be, you know, there for them, or are they going to be stranded? You know, and so the government's really got to realise that, you know, they don't want to be held hostage. This is ridiculous, the Premier says. Yes, it is ridiculous. But it's ridiculous to think that you're now going to sue them. What in the hell is that going to do? Nothing. It's just going to, you know, dig people's, you know, feet in well and truly. So think about that, government, because it's ridiculous. And people in Australia don't need this. It is now November. You know, people need to go away as is. You know, there's going to be disruptions with the airports and planes and whatever else. And God's sake, is anybody going to be allowed to enjoy their Christmas this year without 1 ounce of worry? Don't think so. So take that away, government. Make sure the government realises this and says, okay, we've got to resolve this before December. It would be nice. And it can be done, you know, it can be done so people have peace of mind that they can get wherever they're going to and so forth without any, you know, frustration and, you know, being pissed off, losing their money and whatever else over Christmas, because people need a good Christmas this year. We need a good Christmas, everybody in Oz, you know. Right. So remember that, government, it's not going to be resolved until you sit down, you properly talk to the unions. Because as I said, the ordinary Joe that works and lives in Australia, they believe in the union. So, you know, the union's been here a long time, buddy. You ain't going to wipe that out. So, you know, do something about it. The Minister of Transport, Premier, sit down and talk over the table with the unions, or you'll resolve nothing and the Australian people are going to suffer. So there you go. I'm just going to have another sip of my tea before it goes cold, because I can feel it's going, you know, warm. I don't like warm tea, I like a hot cup of tea. Don't you? Lovely, lovely. Anyway, okay, so I got that off my chest, that little him-ha niggle, which I think is really important for everybody, because Thursday, it's the 20th of the 10th, and I just feel for people that are going to be on the trains tomorrow and worry, and even my friends have said, we live down in Sydney, but what happens if we go on the train? And we get fined for not being able to tap on or tap off, or what happens if we tap on and we can't tap off? How much money do we lose an opal on that? You know, so think about it, because a lot of people are going to be really pissed off and really, really concerned tomorrow, travelling on the trains. And, you know, the transport police want to be a little bit considerate about this, because you can't just fine people or go up fine people because they didn't tap on or they didn't tap off because of tomorrow. So, you know, consider that, because a lot of people are concerned about that, what I hear. Anyway, now, the most critical thing I want to talk about, and I talk about, and I have for a very long time, is psychological and domestic violence, okay? And how psychological violence and domestic violence is all rolled up in one. And it is, it's true. And if you watch some of my tubes, you'll know that. And I'm really pleased to have heard that the government is launching, and it's a good move, is launching their new plan. The government is launching their plan to tackle violence against women and children. Now, the only thing I have with that is, quote, young men too. You should add that, because children grow up into adults. And that, to me, you should also include men. Even though there's patterns formed over generations of men forming domestic violence, there are also women that do form domestic violence and grow up very, have a very difficult behaviour problem. So we want to think about that and want to remember that. But anyway, I'll move on, shall I? Now, the thing is, it's really, really good, that. It's wonderful. And I must say, all the women involved that I can see that have been picked for this launch, good on you. Congratulations. There are a few women that I recognise that have gone through real-life situation, domestic violence. And I'm sure all of them have, but there are one or two that stick out to people because they're our heroes. They're the women that have survived and, you know, been a real voice for domestic violence against women, children, and I quote men, but women and children. So I want to say congratulations. I'm glad that's happened. The thing is, with these women, it's got to be with, as I've stated before on my tubes, for every woman that lives in Australia, whether it doesn't matter about your religion, your race or anything, it's got to be for every woman that lives in Australia that these plans that are to be put in place involves every woman in Oz. Because if it doesn't, or, you know, it goes for one them more than the other, it's not going to work. It's got to be a whole approach for every woman in Australia. So these women that are launching this and putting plans and projects into place, you've got to realise it's got to be real. It's got to be real. It's got to be a real approach to real life. So there's got to be real people on these panels. And there are a few that have experienced lifetime being terrorised and violence and abuse, and their partners or their children have been the victim. Now, and these people have worked so hard to be a voice. They should be heard, and they should, I believe, should be ahead of planning this launch, because we need real life people on the launch of these plans that the government wants to implement. It's really important. One person that I've been listening to, and her name is Hetty Johnson. Now, she's been in her profession for 25 years and doing her job. And I listened to her and what she had to say and her involvement. And I think also with this is real life. She's seen real life. She's been involved in situations and seen things and spoken to people and that sort of thing. That is real life situation. Okay. But what I think is missing is the government wants to tackle this within the next generation. And I don't think, as Hetty Johnson said, it's practical. It's not real life. It's not going to happen. That is not practical. It's not going to happen, and that's true. So what I think Hetty Johnson and other women that launch this plan to tackle violence against women and children need to think about, it's men, when you're a child, when you're a little boy or you're a little girl, that's where it extends from. See, psychological abuse and domestic violence abuse and substance abuse goes hand in hand. But you don't see it because it's as is. We've got to save the children. You're right, Hetty. We do. And we've got to educate them. But we've also got to educate the people that are adults that are in this situation. We've got to educate them how we can change them. And it extends back from their childhood. So you're not going to resolve anything addressing things for changing and implementing and putting things in place for change until you actually look at the psychological effect it had on that person when they were children. And it extends back, as I said, when you're a kid. You lock things in your memory, your subconscious. They don't come out until there's a trigger or there's something or other. And then it slowly creeps out. And then you've got this Pandora's box and it's open. You don't know what to do with it, but it's there, right? It is. So I think what's got to happen now is they've got to address all that, not only for men and young men, but as a whole, for women and men to be able to better understand the mental side of things, the psychological side of things that interacts and interferes in their growing up and their behaviour and how they think and what they do things. It's like a pyramid. It goes up and up and up, you know. So I think that Hetty and the other people involved in this, you've got to address that, because if you don't address that, you won't achieve anything. You'll have, you may think that you're going to address it, but until you address the deep psychological abuse that's happened to these people, and it extends back to when they were children, to address the whole of the problem to address everything that needs to be addressed. So you've got to work with that. And it, as I said, to change this generation, we've got to change the generation that were affected. We've got to change their way of thinking. So when they've got a healthy mind and they are taught, even though you're an adult and you're all grown up, there's always room for change, right? There is. So do that. And you've got to think of that as a family unit. And you've got to bring that, and you've got to make sure that the family is there as a unit so they can understand what's happened to one another, what's happened to mum, what happened to dad. And but also, on the other hand, you've got to address the fact that children are involved and they can only take so much and see so much and hear so much, right? Yes. But you can also, if you do it right, tailor in that so it helps the past generations heal themselves, to find a better way, to be shown a better way. And that will change their children's lives. Be shown a better way, to not be shamed and hide it, but if there is a problem, to face it. And you can. And that's what's missing here, okay? Because, as I said, psychological abuse, then there's physical abuse, then there's a lot of substance abuse. A lot of people tend to cling on to that because they're in a false reality. They're trying to block out everything that's happened. And as I said, it extends back from when they were a kiddie, you know, and they're trying to block that out. So those three are the main things, you know, they're got to be addressed. And they've got to be addressed all in one as a whole, because it is addressed and it is all in one, okay? So for this plan to work, you've got to realise that. You can't just say, well, you know, we're going to put things in place for young men and masculinity in this society. What does that mean? There's a lot of young boys out there that don't have anything. They don't have workshops on the weekend. A lot of them don't have dads, and if they do, you know, you've got to look at that. Are they happy? What's happening at home? I mean, where do these kids go? They end up on trains, you know, graffiti, hanging around plazas, nowhere to ride their skateboards. You know, like, it all goes on. The scenarios go on with the young pups. For us to change that, and for the young men in society to change their way of thinking and their, you know, past generations of culture on what might have, you know, been with their family and their families before that. There's got to be a real change in society for young men and young people now, because there's nothing for any young kid here in Australia. There used to be, you know, lots of free sports, things that involve teenagers and people, but there's nothing. And I think a lot of young men and young women would like to think, well, maybe if I go down to the men's shed, I'll be welcome with a cup of tea and I won't feel so isolated. And, you know, even though there's old men there, maybe the men's sheds have got a lot to offer these young boys, you know, and young men. And maybe women's caves offering, you know, just a nice cup of tea to have a bit of a talk, to get to know one another, that sort of thing. And, you know, have open discussions about things in society which needs to. But for us to address this matter, it's all got to be addressed in one. The psychological side of things, domestic violence, and substance abuse is all, those three are all rolled up in one. If you address it, they are. Also, I do believe that for this to work, it's, as I said on my other tubes, with the courts, that's great. But the laws and clauses need to be closely examined and changed. There's lots of things now that can safeguard women that don't safeguard women and do not safeguard women when they go into family law for their children. And I can tell you there's been some people that I know that have been heartbroken when they've left the family courts knowing that that child's been returned back to their father or their mother, and they know very well what's going to go on behind the scenes, but they can't do anything because the family law says no, this is this and that's that. Well, come on, you know, for this to work, the family courts have got to be involved, the judges, everybody. You've got to think it's all in one. You want to address it all in one. Everybody's got to be in the same team. The police need more training. As I said, they've got to come on board. But, you know, the police have got so much to deal with now. You know, I do feel sorry for the police at times. But they've got to have training. They've got to have a different approach to domestic violence. They've got to have a special team, that sort of thing, to be able to have, you know, some sort of understanding what's going on in society, in their communities. And, you know, that matters because a lot of communities now cling together, you know, as we've seen in the floods, the rains and everything. You know, Australian people cling, they're battlers, they do everything together. And they suffer together, they laugh together, they cry together. So this should be a thing that's all together. And nobody should be left behind. Nobody should be left behind. But I do think it's a good thing if the government's fair dinkum dinky die about this. Please sit down and think about everything and the whole of it all, because otherwise you will not succeed. And I do believe that for this to work, there's got to be a real life approach on everything. Real life. You know, it's got to be real life because it is real life people are leading and living and suffering through. And Lord knows we've got a lot to put up with in Oz. But anyway, I hope you found that informative. You may have already touched base on those little topics that I was talking about. But if you haven't, that's what's happening in Oz, Australia. If you're listening on the other side of the world, hi. Hope you're happy and look after yourself. But yeah, so I think, you know, now with Australia and a lot of people with the floods and rains are feeling the pinch. So if we can help out the farmers or the people in the land, do so, because we all pull together, right, Oz? So, and my thoughts and blessings go out to those communities and people all over Australia that are suffering the floods and have lost everything. I can't imagine what it would be like. But my thoughts and blessings go out to you. And if people can be a help, get out there and help each other. That's the thing in Oz, you know, get in contact and, you know, be like butterflies and busy bees. But anyway, everybody, I hope you found this informative.